Now I'm very happy to welcome back one of our very own handicappers, Mr. Michael Fordam at Fordam Betting. You can check out his great stuff at theoddsbreakers.com. Michael, how you doing, man? College football, I smell it, my friend.
Oh, it's back. It's back. It's still hot outside, so I want to get a little bit cooler, but no, football's back. It's been a fun month just getting ready for the season. It's going to be on the show.
Yeah, it's great having you back, man. It's hot, but that's what we expect. And I'd hate to be. I mean, we're in the southern states, obviously, but I hate to be in the most humid state, which is like Florida, Georgia, that type of area. Oh, forget that.
Being in Houston, I'd put us up against anybody though. It's humid out here.
My brother lives there, actually. I agree. Yeah, maybe Houston is a little close to the ocean. You're right. Little hurricane action coming in. Hopefully not.
Yeah, hopefully not.
That's always been a problem. Are you still at UT?
I am still at UT. Senior year.
Awesome, man. Great stuff. Let me shut this off real quick. And I'm ready to get into some college football, man. So why don't you tell us a little bit what you've been doing all summer?
So, it's been busy with baseball, just kind of been on that everyday grind this summer. I've also started doing some YouTube content, though. I did a quarterback tier ranking kind of series. I went conference by conference. So I did that for all the Power 5 conferences. And then I've just kind of done full preview videos on YouTube as well. I've tried to incorporate some highlights and just kind of some visual effects that make it a little bit easier to watch. And hopefully people can take away some from that. I'm actually finishing up the SEC one right now. And then, really it's just kind of all we're all going to be focused on, game breakdowns. So like I said, can't believe we're already here.
Yeah, I know, man. It's crazy. And I've been working over the summer on it all pretty much since, well, I would say May or June. So, and then the books come out and the magazines come out, making it fun and giving me some extra information. So I'm always adjusting my power ratings, and you know how that goes, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
nonstop.
It's a fun thing, little exercise that we always love to do. Well, let's get into it then, my man. So why don't we start with the American Athletic Conference? Just to be honest, I don't have a ton going on in that conference. I know last week we had some guests on. Felica gave away a couple plays in that, and same with Ralph Michaels. What is your thoughts in the American Athletic Conference so far?
Well, obviously it's been dominated by Cincinnati here these past few years. Cincinnati's got some big losses to account for, though. You obviously lose Desmond Ridder. I wouldn't say he was an elite quarterback, but it's still a guy who has a lot of experience, led them to the playoff last year. I know they got Ben Bryant from, I believe, Eastern Michigan. But it's going to be hard to replace that level of production. But maybe even more importantly, they had Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant in their secondary, 2 huge losses there. They go to Arkansas week 1. I have a hard time seeing them pull off the upset in that game. I think the gap kind of has closed in the conference a little bit. I got to be honest. I haven't done any. I haven't locked in any season win totals for the American yet. But teams like Houston, obviously, I think UCF will be an interesting team. But maybe even teams like Memphis, could start making some noise in this conference. I think it's going to be an adjustment year for Luke Fickell.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, and I almost think that just taking if you're looking at a future, Memphis Cincinnati or Houston, the price is bad on them nowadays. Right. I don't like the plus 240 in Houston, plus 180. It'd be interesting to see if one of those sneaky ones come up, like Memphis, like you said. I think there's going to be some overrated teams coming in, and Houston might be one of those. Kind of like them in their early week, and maybe we'll get to that. But as far as some of the other teams coming in, there's some sneaky ones every year. Remember one year Tulsa came out of nowhere. It was absolutely crazy. East Carolina looks formidable too.
They got a 5th-year quarterback too.
I know they got a guy that's like probably like 25 years old.
Yeah.
I forgot his name offhand.
Holton Ahlers, I believe.
Holton Ahlers, yeah, there it is. Yeah,
Lefty.
He was a moneymaker for me last year. So I did take them over their 6.5 wins. Actually, I think I took them at plus money, and that's one team. So I did make that play since the show last week. So we'll go with that one. What about the ACC, Michael? Lots of changes with Clemson, North Carolina, a little bit more of a down year. Pittsburgh won it, kind of came out of nowhere. People were not high on Pittsburgh, and then whoo! Is that possible to repeat? Who knows? Miami and North NC State seem to be the teams that the bettors are on. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I did make a few bets in the ACC. Just one thing I want to bring up. I don't know if you saw this, but North Carolina's starting running back, British Brooks, looks like he's out for the year. So if y'all take notes on things like that, that's something to account for. I actually took NC State to win this conference. Got it over 8-1. I believe it was plus 830. I think they're just a complete team. I love what they have at all three levels defensively. I rate Devin Leary as the best quarterback preseason in the ACC. I think they got to get the run game going a little bit. I think that's been a little bit of a struggle to find some balance offensively. But I like them on the offensive line, even despite losing a guy last year who's a first-round pick. And I really like what they have on the outside. I mean, my hot take in this conference is that I think North Carolina State goes into Death Valley and beats Clemson outright. I really do. I think they're the better team. I think at some point this year, I mean, Dabo Swinney's going to have to find something else in the quarterback room. I mean, it's not like DJ Uyunglele just had a bad week or a bad few games. I mean, he was terrible all year. And yeah, guys can get better, but I mean, his numbers just kind of speak for themselves. Obviously, Dabo didn't feel great about the depth in that room last year, but bringing in a 5-star like Cade Klubnik, actually from Austin, Texas, I don't think DJ Uiagalelei is going to have that same leash that he did last year. So I did roll with NC State to win the ACC, got it over 8-1. I'll just go over I made 2 season win total bets as well. I took Virginia under the 7.5. I think that's a team. Obviously, they're going to have a really good passing game, but I think people are going to kind of fixate on that and kind of neglect that they're really bad up front on both sides of the ball. I mean, they're going to be relying on 2 FCS transfers on their offensive line to kind of elevate that room. And then I think they're really bad in the secondary as well. I mean, they might not make a bowl game, in my opinion. But I'm also high on Florida State. Played them over the 6.5. If Jordan Travis can stay healthy, I mean, he was 5-2 as their starter last year, and they were 0-5 without him. A true dual threat guy. And now with just one more year in the system, I think he kind of takes that next step this year. They can run the football. I like what they have up front on both sides of the ball. So I played them over the 6.5 wins as well.
Nice. I mean, I also like the fact, well, I don't like what happened to Sam Hartman. I mean, from a betting standpoint, it's our business to have to react to this. And so it kind of takes them out of the equation a little bit, and it's
Is
probably
he going to be out for the year?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
Maybe this could be all a smoke screen, and finds 2 doctors to clear him. Who knows what's going to happen? But obviously, that's locked in a lot of books right there. I took NC State, Miami. I have no disagreement there. The problem with Clemson is now they benefit even more because they do get NC State at home, and they were going to Wake Forest. I was kind of hoping for a loss at Wake Forest for Clemson. So unfortunately, that almost hurts my ticket a little bit more. But I wonder if it doesn't look like people are looking at it like that because you have better line value than what's at right now, 7.5 to 1.
One thing I'll say real quick too, I know Miami is a team with a lot of hype. Once again, they've got a pretty overvalued quarterback in Tyler Van Dyke. Yeah, he had a pretty good end of the last season, but I mean, Mario Cristobal was brought in there for a reason. I mean, they were pretty poor defensively under Manny Diaz. Still think they got some concerns up front. So I just think Miami's probably a few years away from being a top level ACC team.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I do like them in that side though, because everybody on that side seems to not be that good. I mean, if you look at Miami's schedule, it's just really set up well for them. And I'm trying to find it right now. Okay, so Miami, it's going to come down to the game against Pitt at the end. And yes, they have to go to Clemson, unfortunately. They do get Florida State at home. But they do avoid NC State. They avoid Wake Forest. They avoid Boston College. I'm not too worried about at Virginia Tech. They get Duke, at Georgia Tech, not worried at all about that. So it just seems like their schedule makes it really easy for them. So I got cute and I took both, and I'm hoping we'll get that ACC championship of NC State Miami. So,
oh yeah.
we'll see what happens. Pittsburgh lost Whipple too. The offensive coordinator. Besides,
They're going to be a completely new look team. I mean, Pat Narduzzi before last year was like such a ugly offensive type of coach. It's going to go right back to that now that Whipple's gone.
Yeah, it's like, did you think Narduzzi learned anything? I don't think he paid attention to the offense. At his age, he's probably not. Yeah, I agree. This is going to be a different Pitt team, but we'll see how they adjust. There's a chance, I guess, that the new guy coming up here, I think it's Frank Signetti.
Yeah,
he could actually, I guess, maybe to take some of Whipple's best practices. What are your thoughts about that?
I've kind of always thought of him as more of a run first guy. But you are getting a guy like Keaton Slovis, who's coming from an air raid system. Personally, I think it's kind of a weird fit. And I'm not really all that high on Slovis. But with that being said, I think the way Pitt can survive is just, I mean, they were second in the country in sacks last year. And I like their offensive line too. I just think that they're going to beat teams like Virginia, like I said, who are just so poor up front. I think they're going to beat a lot of these teams just by what they have in the trenches alone.
Yeah, I think pound them to death, and the defense should be there. So those teams. So it's kind of like going to be one of those situations where you want to take them when they're a favorite against some of these bad teams, maybe because they're just going to pound them into submission. It's a good way of looking at it.
We're going to find out a lot about them too in that week 1 game against West Virginia. I'm really excited to watch that game.
That's a great test game, isn't it?
Thursday night too.
Yeah, heck yeah. Wow. So it's a September 1st game, one of the first games of week 1. That's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to this matchup as well. I think it's going to be one heck of one. Let's move on to the Big 12, my man. Why don't you let us know what you like or dislike there?
So obviously, y'all know I do go to Texas. I've grown up a Texas fan my whole life. I'm really not biased about this, but I really just don't see it with this Oklahoma team. It was obviously a very eventful off season, losing Lincoln Riley, having kind of a max exodus in the transfer portal. I do like what they brought in at quarterback with Dylan Gabriel. I mean, I power rate him as the best quarterback here in the Big 12, but some of the difference makers that they've had over the past 5 or 6 years, they just don't have that. I mean, I don't think they have a true go-to receiver right now. I mean, maybe Marvin Mims can be that guy. I don't think they have a game-changing running back. I worry about them a little bit up front on the offensive line, and then I just think defense. It's really hard for first-year coaches, and this is the thing about Oklahoma too. It's not just a new coach. Like when Lincoln Riley took over for Bob Stoops, I mean, he inherited a really good program. I mean, Brent Venables is trying to come in and completely change what Oklahoma's identity is. I mean, he's trying to take a really kind of a offense first team and kind of mold his defensive beliefs into it. So I do think there's a little bit of an adjustment period there. I did play their under 9.5, by the way. And I just think there's so much parity in this conference. I think that gap is closed. Some of these road games that they're going to play that, I mean, like at Iowa State, at West Virginia. I mean, obviously they play Texas in the neutral site game, at Nebraska. Some of those games in past years, you might have said, oh, well, they're just going to out-talent them. Well, I don't think they have that luxury this year. So I do think there's 3 or more losses on that schedule. I kind of alluded to it already. One team I'm pretty high on is West Virginia. It kind of felt similar. Last year, I played Kansas State over the 5.5. Felt like that was too low, and that cashed pretty easily. I think JT Daniels is such an upgrade at the quarterback position. I mean, Jared Dagey was just a noodle arm. I mean, now you're getting a guy in JT Daniels, former 5-star. He's got the arm talent, and in my opinion, probably would have won the national championship if he didn't get hurt last year at Georgia. So I think that's a huge upgrade in that room. And personally, I like what Neil Brown has done at West Virginia. They've always been solid defensively, and now he brings in Graham Harrell to kind of figure out the offense a little bit. I'm not asking them to go win the Big 12. I'm asking them to win 6 games. So I did play that over 5.5 as well.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, hey, I'm with you on Oklahoma. I bet them under the 9.5. I did that right away. That was the first season win total bet I made. I thought that you cannot change the culture that quick. It got really messy, and obviously with Gundy, all the horrible stuff going on there with just the team camaraderie changes when that happens. it was a situation that I thought was easy to take them under, especially when you have an improved Big 12 and a very volatile Big 12. You've
Yeah.
got Oklahoma leaving, Texas leaving. It's just the other teams are just, probably not so impressed with what's going on there. And we don't know if Venables is a great head coach. We know he's a very great defense coordinator, maybe the best defense coordinator over the last 5 years.
Yeah, we saw it with Will Muschamp, great defensive coordinator, but a terrible head coach. I mean, it's a completely different role.
Yeah, absolutely. So I took that, and I like Kansas over 2.5 because they have 2 cake wins. They just got to get one more. I think that's going to happen with Lance.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, there's a lot of first-year head coaches, like a team like TCU, Texas Tech, even. Those teams are vulnerable to dropping a game to a team like Kansas. Surely.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm hearing good things about Texas Tech, man. I am.
I love that offensive coordinator they hired from Western Kentucky. I mean, I wouldn't even call it the air raid. I mean, it's like he's got a joystick and he's playing NCAA football 14. I mean, he's running 4 verticals every time. I mean, that Western Kentucky offense was explosive. I guess the one concern for Texas Tech, I don't know if they have a quarterback on that roster that's kind of built to run that offense. But I definitely do think long term that was a really good hire.
Yeah, and I think with Texas Tech, they've got a lot of connections with that new coach with the high schools over there, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
and so
being from Texas, I can tell you I've heard that name for a long time. He was one of the more well-respected high school football coaches over the last 20 years or so. So it's definitely a unique hire, but I actually do think it'll work out.
Yep, Joey McGuire and Zach Kitley came from Sam Houston, which was, I believe, in the FCS before he went to Western Kentucky, I believe, and he was amazing there. And like half the team moved to Western Kentucky, so they were awesome. Like
receiver, I know.
Yeah, now with the quarterbacks in the NFL, competing on the Patriots.
Yeah,
so interesting, man. No, great stuff. Let's move on to the Big Ten. So, what do you got in the Big Ten? And if it's not Ohio State, then what do you think?
Well, I do think it will be Ohio State. I wouldn't advocate for playing. I mean, I guess maybe if you wanted to sprinkle on one of those teams in the East. And personally for me, as far as the future in the Big Ten West, I mean, I could see 4 or 5 separate teams maybe winning that division. On my video, I called it cannibalism. I mean, I think these teams are it's just gonna be so much parity in that division. If I had to advocate for one, sprinkle on a conference future, I mean, maybe Minnesota, because I do think they are getting some pretty good odds. And I do like some things about them. But I stuck with 2 win totals here in the Big Ten. I put Maryland over the 5.5. Obviously lots of continuity now on the offensive side of the ball. You got Taulia Tagovailoa. No, he's not his older brother. I get that. I do think he gets criticized for that, but he had a good year last year. I mean, the only bad game he really had was against Iowa. He threw 5 picks in that game. I mean, that accounted for half of his interception total throughout the year. So
it did.
But I think an underrated part about Maryland is they can run the football too. I mean, they had 2 separate guys at or above 5 yards per carry last year. Mike Loxley's done a great job recruiting the wide receiver position. I mean, Raheem Jarrett, guys like that. One more year in that program. Do think they have some playmakers on the outside, and then I also like what they have up front. It's similar to West Virginia. Like, I'm not asking them to win the conference, but I thought 5.5 was pretty generous there. I also played Iowa over the 7.5, and I get it. They're not a sexy team, but I call it a principal bet. But Kirk Ferentz is the longest tenured head coach in the country for a reason. I mean, I loved Iowa last year, and I know a lot of people talked about it. It kind of reminded me of Providence in basketball. Like, people just couldn't believe how they were defying some of the predictive analytics. Obviously, they had a very wide turnover margin, but I think part of that skill. I mean, they got a really good defense. The one thing I think about Iowa too, I do think that they're going to be able to run the football better. Think they'll be a little bit better up front. And it turns out Tyler Goodson just wasn't as good as people thought. Did have some young running backs look pretty good in the bowl game. And I think one favorable matchup for them that, one upset maybe I might call is I do think they beat Michigan at home. I think it's week 5 or week 6. I think, they'll probably be undefeated entering that game. I think they do get the job done at home. So I put over the 7.5 as well on Iowa.
Wow. Iowa, man. Oh, I was a little, I was a tricky team last year. Their defense was fantastic. They did lose a few guys to the draft like they do every single year, but that quarterback just doesn't seem that accurate over at Iowa. And I'm just not sure about Spencer Petras. And there's another quarterback over there
Alex Padilla, I think.
that's making a little bit of noise. Yeah, I mean, the problem with Iowa this year is that they go to Minnesota. They do get Wisconsin at home, which is nice. Wisconsin did beat the crap out of them last year in Wisconsin. That game against Penn State was lucky, but I think the at Purdue is a little tricky. Now, the Iowa State should be a win. Nevada, South Dakota State, those are nice 3-0. At Rutgers should be 4-0. Wow, if you get that Michigan sneaky one, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
I actually I took Purdue plus 550 and Nebraska plus 390 to win the Big Ten West. And I'm a Badger fan. You know that. After seeing Mertz, unless he gets rid of the yips, I'm really worried about him. I'm hoping Bobby Ingram, their new offensive coordinator, changes him around a little bit, and that's possible. I'm hearing good things from camp, but you hear that all the time. Beat writers, they just pump. They need something to write about. They need excitement. If they start writing bad stuff, people will quit reading them. It's just the way beat writers work, man. So I think every like all 4 to 5 of these teams should be around 8 season win total, in my opinion. Anything under that's probably a good overplay. So I can just at the straight numbers, I can see Minnesota, Wisconsin, maybe not as much Minnesota, but Wisconsin, Nebraska, Purdue, and Iowa winning this thing. The problem with Minnesota is their schedule is very tough. At Nebraska, at Wisconsin, at Penn State, and at Michigan State. They do avoid Ohio State, but that could be 4 L's right there. So
do you worry at all about Purdue not being able to run the ball? Because that was obviously a big issue for him last year. I know I'm really high on Aiden O'Connell, but I mean, at some point in that conference, teams are going to figure out if you don't have a balanced attack. That's my really only concern with Purdue. And I think, once again, we're going to figure out a ton about them in that week 1 game against Penn State.
Well, they returned 3 offensive linemen. King Duoru is supposedly back. He was banged up last year. He's decent. And their philosophy hasn't been to run it. Jeff Brom has never been like that. What I'm more worried about is their defense.
Yeah.
And, they lost Carol Aftis and a couple other guys to the draft, which was very, I guess, concerning. But what you do have, Michael, is you have a team that avoids Michigan and Ohio State. The rest of the guys are playing those 2 teams. They could be losses there, probably L's. Those are 2 L's they avoid. So they just got to win a game at home against Nebraska. They got to get Iowa at home, probably lose at Wisconsin, but at Minnesota is a coin flip game. They got screwed, I believe, last year. I think they're going to be out for revenge on that game, and it's just their schedule is the reason why I like it. So
okay.
We'll see what happens with Aiden O'Connell. He was somewhat impressive to me last year, to be honest.
Oh, very, yeah. I mean, he's really efficient. I think he's over 70%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was fantastic last year. All right, let's move on to Conference USA. I don't have much there. We have.
I don't have any, or I'm interested to see, I guess, one thought. I know Western Kentucky, obviously they lose their offensive coordinator, who really kind of brought all of his guys from the FCS level, like you said. I believe that last I saw, their win total was at 8.5, because I was just interested to check. I actually saw this morning, Jarrett Dagey, who I mentioned earlier, transferred from West Virginia, and then he transferred out of Western Kentucky this morning. I'm just curious, because they were truly just a dominant offense last year, but they obviously lose a lot. So I'm interested to see how they hold up this year. I mean, I'm really high on UTSA. Think Jeff Traylor has done a good job there, so should be interesting.
Yeah, I like UAB until Bill Clark left. I still like them to win the conference, but UTSA is going to have some defensive problems, I think. So that's my issue there. Let's move on to the MAC then. Did you play anything in the MAC?
No, I've never handicapped the MAC.
All right, not return of the MAC then, and we'll move on to the Mountain West Conference. Might as well throw an A in there, right? I'll just tell you right now, my only play was Fresno State over 8.5. I laid -125. It's at -140. I think Jeff Tenford's back, and Jake Hayner's back, and Jake Hayner was fantastic. He threw over 4,000 yards last year. I see maybe 2 losses versus Oregon State and USC, but you have to remember that this team beat the Pac-12 last year, so they can come in and licking their chops against Lincoln Riley. Imagine how big of a program win that would be if they can get that one. But everybody else is cake. If they get past Boise State, smooth sailing. Let's just say you get those 3 losses. They avoid Air Force, they avoid Utah State, and they get San Diego State at home. I think it's an easy plan.
No, I definitely get you on the Fresno State thing. I think they take those Pac-12 games very seriously because they went and beat UCLA last year, and then I think they lost a cupcake game that next week. It's either to Hawaii or UNLV. They lost one of those games they had no business losing. So they clearly put a lot of stock in beating the big boys. I couldn't talk you off that. I'm interested to see Boise State this year. I mean, they held up nicely defensively last year, but personally, I was really high on Hank Bachmeier coming into last year, but their offense as a whole is just pretty ineffective. It's going to be, I'm kind of in wait and see mode on them. Obviously with, I believe it's Andy Avalos as their head coach. Kind of more of a defensive minded guy. I just kind of need to see it before I believe it. I think Air Force is a team though that I bet on a few times last year. That I like the way they played in the bowl game against Louisville. And I think people are really high on them this year. Some people I've talked to. So I think that's a team you're going to have to watch out for too.
Oh yeah. Air Force is kind of the dark horse to win it. My only problem with them is, they're kind of moving a little away from the option. And they got some, but I think teams are going to be a little bit more ready for some of their sneakiness. They're a sneaky team, but when they execute it, man, it's hard to stop because it's like there's a one way to play the option. It leaves your secondary susceptible to a lot of stuff. If that's not working for you, these guys have to react quickly to get back on that receiver. This is going to be complete zone situation.
Right.
So, it's going to be really hard for them to do that. I guess they would man up on each receiver, but they're going to wait and they're going to have to play back a little bit, and that's going to hurt them a little bit. It's just such an interesting and intriguing thing that Air Force has over there, man. So I'm just so curious to see what happens with them.
But it's really interesting how some of these triple option type teams just kind of come and go. I remember Navy was really good, like 2015, 2016. Like they were a 9, 10, 11 win team one of those years. It's funny how they have the exact same systems. I guess it's just how you recruit and it just kind of clicks for some guys.
Yeah, Zeke Daniels threw for over 1,000 yards last year, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Now only at 50%, but that just makes them just so dangerous when you're focused on the option so much. So, but
no, I remember betting I bet the over in that bowl game they played against Louisville. And one of the reasons why is because they will sneak up on teams and move the ball through the air vertically. I think that's kind of always in their back pocket. So I do like that about them too. It's not like Navy who literally never throws the ball.
Totally. It might come down to at San Diego State at the end when San Diego State does know how to play the option. So that's really interesting. They beat them last year. Let's move on to the Pac-12 since we just ripped on them so bad. So I did the obvious, but I took this early. Utah over 8.5. I was like, why the hell is this 8.5? I see some really weird lines with Utah this year. I did fade USC under the 9.5. So that could be out there still. My dark horse to win it's Oregon State, and I got 40-1. So
dang, I got 33-1 on that, but I'm right there with you. I really like this. I sprinkled on the 33-1, and I also played the over 6.5 wins. I really like this team. They can really run the football. I think Chance Nolan is he kind of reminds me of Cade McNamara. He's just kind of a game manager, but he's the perfect guy for what Jonathan Smith is trying to do. They also get a pretty favorable schedule too. I'll say one team that I'm really low on is Washington. I played their under 7.5 wins. It really just comes down to they don't have quarterback figured out. I think they got Michael Penix, who you obviously remember from Indiana. He's below 60% throughout his career. He's never been all that great. Couldn't run the ball last year. Their offensive line was supposed to be really good, and they just completely flopped. They might get better this year, but this is not going to be some sort of explosive offense. And then I also don't like what they have defensively either. It's once again a first-year head coach. They obviously had some things arise last year with Jimmy Lake. I thought 7.5 was way too high. And then I'm really high on UCLA this year. If I had one dark horse for the Heisman Trophy, it would be Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think one of the issues with him last year is got hurt middle of the year, but you saw what he could do at times. I mean, they put up 62, I believe, on USC. He's a dual threat guy, and one thing that you've got to remember, I mean, he's now going to be a fifth-year starter, and Chip Kelly threw him to the Wolves immediately back in 2018 as a true freshman. And all he's done is just get better and better and better. I mean, a fifth-year guy, he's a huge breakout candidate in my mind. And I also like how they run the football with Zach Charbonnet too. So I played over the 8.5 with UCLA as well.
Well, that's a big number. The problem with UCLA is they only returned 2 on defense, but it's not like their defense was that good anyway.
No, exactly. Yeah.
It was a little bit better last year. I mean, this is going to be overs. Almost blind bet these overs, I think, with how bad this defense could look. But yeah, you're right. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to be fantastic, and they can just keep scoring. They can be like well, I guess the Wake Forest of last year, maybe a little bit. But if they have a little bit better of a defense, hopefully, than Wake did, then they could definitely compete, especially in the South, where I think it's volatile with the USC. No, probably not Utah though, but that's why you're probably going overs. Now,
I'm probably not as low on their defense as you. I think they can hold up well up front, especially on the interior defensive line. But I definitely do get the concern. But I mean, contrary to popular belief, the Pac-12 is not filled with a ton of explosive offenses. There's a lot more balance than you might think.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more balance in the Pac-12 than people. I think that it's minus Utah, everything's pretty close, in my opinion. Like,
what do you think about Oregon?
I think that Oregon's just going to kind of they're getting kicked around a little bit. Imagine losing Mario Cristobal like that to Miami. He's got to hurt, and you invested so much into him. Now, they did pick up Danny Lanning as coach, and they still have all those recruits with all that Nike money and everything, but Bo Nix, I'm not high on Bo Nix. And I don't think he's a great quarterback. I think he's good to keep him in the game. But I think this team as a favorite is going to stink. I think it's going to be one of those fade the favorite type situations. And they're just always just kind of replacing players because, they get the talent. They just kind of dog it like Thibodeau, and he goes out to the draft, So I agree. And one thing I do want to say about Washington is that they at least get Penix's old coordinator for head coach and Kalen DeBoer, and DeBoer just did such a great thing, I believe, over at Fresno State. I think he was the coordinator there. I believe it was something.
He was the head coach.
Oh, duh, he was that. Yeah. He was the head coach because the head coach moved on. Tedford moved back, and that's right. That's for some reason in my mind I was thinking Tedford was just there, even though I just said he wasn't. So Washington could be a little. I don't know about sneaky, but I do like the coach because he killed it at Fresno State last year. So that's my only pushback or worry. Let's move on to the SEC, which is regarded as, well, I guess the best conference in football. Can't really argue against that when Georgia and Alabama's been there so much. But now you got some other strong teams sneaking up. You got your Tennessee's coming up. Kentucky's going nowhere. They're looking pretty solid coming into the preseason. Texas A&M should be better. They beat Alabama. They beat Alabama last year, and then all of a sudden they, just lose to other teams. It's just, but the SEC is tough. What's your thoughts on the SEC?
Yeah, so I didn't do any futures because I think it'll be Georgia and Bama. Don't think there's much value in betting that. But my season win total bets, first one, I loved Arkansas over the 7.5. I think this is a really good team. Obviously, it went 9-4 last year. KJ Jefferson was one of the biggest surprises in the country for me. He's obviously a bigger dude, and with Kendall Briles, it requires a lot of precision and touch out of the quarterback, and he delivered. 69% completion, almost 9.5 yards per attempt, only 3 interceptions. You just have to go watch that game against Alabama. They were able to move the ball in that Crimson Tide defense, and it's not only their passing game. They had 5 guys at or above 5 yards per, or excuse me, 3 guys at or above 5 yards per carry last year. So it's a really balanced attack. I also think they got better defensively in certain areas. Their second level, they obviously got Bumper Pool at linebacker, but I think one of the big transfers that, I think people were talking about it, but Drew Sanders transferring over from Alabama, I think he's going to be an immediate impact at Arkansas. I love that pickup. And then, Jalen Catalon, in my opinion, is one of the most fun guys to watch. Safety who just plays at all three levels. And Barry Odom has some unique responsibilities for those safeties. But, I mean, at 7.5, like I said, I don't think they have much trouble with Cincinnati. Yeah, that game might be close, but I have a hard time seeing them lose that game week 1. I mean, really, aside from Alabama, there's no other surefire loss on the schedule. I mean, I think they could beat A&M. I'll say the one thing about Arkansas, though, extremely tough schedule. I mean, they got to go to BYU middle of the season. That's a weird game. I mean, they probably have the hardest schedule in the country, but I just love the makeup of this team. So I did play the over 7.5. And then one team I'm not so high on is Florida. I just don't buy into the Anthony Richardson hype. He's just not a proven passer. And, they're going to get challenged right off the bat. I mean, they play Utah and Kentucky week 1, week 2. Yeah, they're both at home, but I mean, talk about 2 tough games with a first-year head coach. I don't particularly love the way Louisiana's offense ran under Billy Napier and Rob Sale. I mean, I thought they were a team much more led by their defense. And I have worries about Florida running the ball. I don't think they're going to step up well on their offensive line. And one kind of talking about cultural issues. That team quit last year under Dan Mullen. If things kind of hit the fan this year, they're going to quit again. So I'll take my chances with the under 7.
Yeah, they quit until people found out they quit, and then they kind of played a little bit hard against Florida
I mean,
State.
they gave up like 50 to Samford. I mean, you can't give up 50 points to Samford.
I don't disagree. I don't know why that line was sitting at 2 for a long time against Utah. It's really scratched my head.
Is it still under 3?
I looked last week. It was 2.5 juice to the minus 120. It's probably at 3 by now, but I took minus 2 flat. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, this line stinks. Maybe Florida's the right side, but I'm like, I did the research. I couldn't find anything why this is not a 6 to 7 point favorite. It blew my mind. I guess it's Utah away from home.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably that home field advantage, but I think I've heard a lot of hype around Anthony Richardson. I know he's a high upside quarterback, and he's obviously a threat with his legs, but he's going to have to win games with his arms. And I think people are talking as if he's a sure thing. I think he's anything but that.
One thing I'll say about Arkansas, that KJ Jefferson showed something last year, and Kendall Briles leading that team could be what they need. They do return 4 offensive linemen now. I completely agree with that schedule, but if you look at it this way, they get Alabama and LSU and Ole Miss at home. Sure, they're in Texas A&M, but if they can just be great at home this year, they might be competing there.
I totally agree. I think that A&M game is a neutral site.
Okay. Oh yeah, Arlington. Yeah, but that's gonna probably still have more Texas A&M fans, I would imagine, but maybe not. Arkansas is not far. All right. No, great stuff. So you told me Arkansas. I was really thinking about betting over Arkansas. So you're really almost getting me to the window. Yeah, I might make the decision on that later. All right. Let's move on to the Fun Belt, man. Fun Belt. I took James Madison under 6.5 because they have 11 games, so saw that one early.
They have 11 games.
Yeah, they only have 11 games this year.
Oh wow!
So I was like, why? I think the books took a while to figure that one out, but. Coming in their first year, there's going to be teams gunning for them. They're going to be like, look, we're not going to lose to the FCS team coming up. And the problem with James Madison, even though they're an amazing program, probably in like the top 70, even if you count them with the FBS, they still return not a lot of guys. They from what I'm seeing, they lost 2 or 3 receivers. They lost a running back. They lost a quarterback from last year. And so their second guys better be really good. I don't see anybody breaking down the doors to transfer into James Madison their first year anyway. So right. I don't think the transfer portal helped them so much. Anything in the Fun Belt?
I love the makeup of that Coastal Carolina team. I love their offensive system probably just more than anything. I mean, they kind of just run like a pseudo triple option, just kind of out of the shotgun. But kind of like we talked about with Air Force, they can strike deep in that passing game. And I do like Grayson McCall quite a bit. I was looking at one game specifically. I think Appalachian State could win that game at home against North Carolina. I believe it's week 2. I was surprised to see Chase Bryce was back at App State. He just seems like he's been in college football for like 7 years now. But I mean, you obviously have experience there. They were great running the football last year. That's a game that's going to be tough for UNC. I mean, it's obviously not an easy environment to play in. Granted, it's a group of 5 school, but still, I do think you have to watch out for App State. I mean, we saw them, play Miami close last year, and obviously be successful just historically in some of those bigger games. So that was one more game I was looking at, but I haven't locked in any season win totals yet.
Yeah, so that's the only one I played. I think I'm not. Oh no, wait! I took Arkansas State under because how do you not fade Butch Jones? I mean,
Oh my God.
he is just the worst of the worst. And I think I got a 5, and I don't care who they're playing. He's just been an absolute disappointment everywhere he's went. And I don't know how the heck he even still has a coaching job. I find it very strange that Clay Helton's coaching Georgia Southern as well, and it's just a very weird cultural fit.
Yeah, going from Los Angeles to like Statesboro, Georgia, that's quite the culture shock.
Yeah, that's what Brian Edwards said, and he's been to Statesboro a few times, so it's a different situation there. But they're going away from the triple option finally, so yeah, that's probably going to be ugly. Can't imagine it's not. Awesome. Anything in the independents before we touch on week 0?
Personally, I'm not all that high on Notre Dame. I saw them. Were they a top 5 team today in the AP poll? I believe they were.
I don't know. I haven't looked at the AP yet because
I just got a notification. I mean, I think this is a solid football team. I think they have a pretty high floor overall. I mean, they got guys like Michael Mayer, who's probably the best tight end in the country. They got a good. I think all 5 starters return on the offensive line, or at least 4. But at the end of the day, they don't have quarterback figured out yet. I think Tyler Buckner is a guy that, is obviously mobile. But once again, he's unproven through the air. Personally, I mean, I'm leaning pretty heavily towards Ohio State minus 15.5. In that week 1 game, that is not a top 5 versus top 5 matchup, in my opinion. I just think Notre Dame's clearly a step below a team like Ohio State. I haven't played it yet, but I definitely lean towards their season win total under. It'll be, I guess part of the reason, and one thing I'm having a hard time with is, by the end of the year when they play a team like USC, I think, 2 teams with first-year head coaches, we know how that can go. It's just kind of hard to judge some of those games for me right now. But, I mean, going up against a team like BYU, I mean, that's anything but a surefire win. I really like the makeup of that BYU team. So I do lean under on the Notre Dame season win total.
And what was it at, 9 or something?
I believe so.
I'll take a look here right now, just so we're not giving out BS. 8.5 for the over. So yeah, I mean, minus 150. The over is practically saying 9 anyway,
right?
So there you go. Awesome, man. Great stuff. Great breakdowns on what you like and what you don't like in these conferences. Let's just take a look at week 0 then. No need to go game by game, but do you have any plays that you want to throw out there that you might have already taken for the very first week? And I like to say week 1A, but it's not catching on. I don't know why. I thought it was popular enough for that to happen, but apparently not. So we'll call it week 0 for that. And anything that you like coming up.
I haven't locked anything up yet. I was looking at 3 games specifically. I mean, starting with that Nebraska Northwestern game, I'll be the first to say I don't have a great read on Nebraska. I'm obviously familiar with Casey Thompson from last year at Texas. I do think he's a above average quarterback, but he's not going to come in and be the savior of all Nebraska's problems. I mean, Scott Frost has still got some work to do there, but I do like bringing in Mark Whipple. I guess I have a hard feel because obviously Mark Whipple was an up-tempo guy last year at Pitt. And certainly Nebraska didn't run that style last year. So I guess I just kind of had a harder time judging the total at 50.5. I remember week 0 last year, I played that under in the Nebraska-Illinois game. I guess with Northwestern, I have questions about who's playing quarterback, first of all, because if it's Ryan Holinski, then yikes. I mean, I think he's the worst quarterback in the Big Ten probably. So it's probably going to have to be some of those younger guys. And the one thing I don't like about Northwestern, too, is, their strength is running the football, but I'm really high on this Nebraska run defense. I mean, I think Garrett Nelson is a guy that could be one of the best linebackers in the country. And think this is a Nebraska team that should be pretty good against the run. So I haven't locked anything up in that game yet, but I'm still trying to look at some nuances in that game. I do lean Illinois in that game against Wyoming. I think we didn't talk about Illinois earlier, but I do think they're somewhat undervalued. Personally, I like what I saw last year from them. I mean, they beat Penn State in Happy Valley. I believe they beat Minnesota outright as well. Also beat Nebraska. Um, maybe this is kind of a hot take, but I think Tommy DeVito coming in to be their quarterback, I think that's a move that works out. I mean, Brandon Peters didn't really work out for them last year. And then they got, I think Artur Sitkowski is still there somehow. But I do like DeVito coming over from Syracuse. He never really got a fair shake there. I mean, they were so bad up front. I mean, couldn't protect him. This is going to be an Illinois team, though, that is obviously very run heavy. And they were top 30 in scoring defense last year. I just see Wyoming having a hard time to move the ball. And, as far as that Vanderbilt-Hawaii game later that night, I don't really have much of a feel for that game. But if you want to lay points with Vanderbilt this year, then that's on you. I wouldn't advocate doing that personally.
Well, one thing about Bielema and Illinois is that when they were underdogs, they did perform well, but as favorites, they did not. And that's why I hate them in this spot. I actually like Wyoming in this spot. I don't think Tommy DeVito's all that good. And I know he didn't get a lot of chance to throw the ball when he was over at Syracuse. But he's not going to get much of a chance here either because Illinois' offensive line, they replace they lose 3 guys and only keep 2 starters. So I think Illinois is going to get an ugly win because that's how they do it. I don't think it's going to be up to 10 points. And Wyoming, they're just that team that's always -6 on my power ratings, an average of 6 points lower than the 0. That's just what they are. And they'll come out firing as much as they can. And I don't know if Illinois is going to take them seriously. What worries me is Illinois did beat Nebraska last year. Their very first game, if you remember. So that was a head scratch. But Nebraska just tends to beat themselves because Nebraska out there. But I think it's different now that Mark Whipple's at Nebraska, and I think they're going to see a much better offense with Casey Thompson there. Casey Thompson wasn't that bad at Texas.
No, I don't think so either. But he wasn't. It's one of those things where his highs were really high, but I mean, in Iowa State, I think he was 2 for 7 for 8 yards, and he got yanked. He played bad. He played bad on the road mostly. So maybe that trend continues. I mean, we put up 70 points on Texas Tech. I mean, we put up 48 on Oklahoma. So, I mean, Casey Thompson is an above average quarterback, but I didn't think I think Adrian Martinez is kind of made out to be the scapegoat of all of Nebraska's problems. I mean, I'd put that much more on special teams for them was just horrific last year. And they just found ways to lose games. So, they're kind of like the anti-Providence from basketball this year. And Providence was a team that kept winning by like 3 or 4 points and was like, can they continue to defy the odds? It was the exact opposite for Nebraska. So it'll be interesting. I'll be the first to admit, I don't have a great feel on them preseason.
Yeah, Brad, I feel good about them. I think Northwestern is going to be terrible. I think laying the points in Nebraska is going to be just fine at the 12 here. They're at home. They're fired up. They have the best recruiting in the West. Northwestern just has been a mess. And if you looked at them last year, losing to Duke like that, holy cow, this team was awful. And for them to come back from that and have a decent season, I know they get better with coach over there, and they tend to surprise sometimes, but it's just not this year. I think starting off on the road at Nebraska could really hurt them, especially with Mark Whipple, who can run the score up. So I like Nebraska.
That game is in Dublin, by the way.
I'm sorry. It's in Dublin, but it's still an away game for them.
That's right.
That's gonna be an awesome game, by the way.
I can't wait.
I'm excited about that. Thanks for reminding me.
By the way, I had one question. I kind of alluded to it, but do you think Ryan Holinski is going to be the guy? Because I mean, obviously, I wouldn't want to back him if that's the case. I know they got 2 younger guys that are battling it out, but I just haven't heard a lot. They're obviously not a very well covered team.
Yeah, I'm hearing that he is, unless something has changed. Now everything's happening now. So
right.
It could have changed. I do follow some beat writers for them, but I just don't think that the guys that they have in could be any good too. Brendan Sullivan, he was a redshirt freshman last year. Pat Fitzgerald is a good coach, and that's the only thing that's kind of taken me a little bit. But this team was just brutal last year, and
their defense was bad too.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing about it. They're usually getting by at least with their defense. That didn't happen last year, and their recruiting obviously isn't good because they're Northwestern. There's nothing they can do about that. Cam Porter is at least back at running back, so they should be at least a little bit better there. I mean, they beat Ohio, but we figured out Ohio was a terrible team last year, and they beat Rutgers at home, which was a terrible team. But the way they lost to Michigan State by double digits that very first game. Indiana State, I guess, count that a win if you want, but losing to Duke, very pathetic last year. I just think that Nebraska is going to get some margin here, so that's my plan.
I'll say one more thing about that matchup. Obviously, Northwestern's weakness last year was going up against the run. Nebraska's best running back last year, just 4.4 yards per carry. And Mark Whipple, I mean, I don't know if you followed this, but Pat Narduzzi was like, I don't know why Mark Whipple didn't run the ball more last year. So he can get a little pass happy. I'm just interested to see, if he does try to take advantage of that supposed weakness and, try to pound the ground game a little bit. That's not really his style, but I do think that could lead to good things.
I'm worried about the field too. Who knows how it's going to be out in Dublin, right? That's
exactly
like foreign place.
That's always a mystery.
Yeah. So that's interesting. If it's not conducive to the pass, so that could be where maybe you would like Northwestern a little bit if that's the case. It's just that when my power ratings have a 5-point discrepancy, meaning my number is 17 and the number's 12, I have to take it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's just even though it's early, I just have to take it, or else I just didn't do my job correctly in my power rating. So that's the way. Yeah. So awesome stuff, Mike. Great job breaking all this stuff down. Where could our viewers and listeners get your great information and your plays?
Well, obviously posting for the Odds Breakers every day. You can find my free play page there. Just go to theoddsbreakers.com. I've been doing mostly baseball at this point. So if you just go to the MLB category, I'll be there. And you can also just choose me as your handicapper. On Twitter, at Fordam Betting. I'm pretty active on there. And then, like I said, I've also been more active on YouTube, just Michael Fordam on YouTube. Appreciate you having me on, Kiev.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, man. Make sure you guys check out Michael. He had a fantastic year last year. I can just see all good things to come in the future.